Hi, my name is Larry Bowen. Welcome to the class. I want to take a minute to encourage you to go very carefully through this orientation material. That will help you get off to a good start and have a great semester. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class. As I said, my name is Larry Bowen. I'll be your instructor. My email address is lbowen@ua.edu. All our correspondence will go through that. Some of the classes use another system, but I like for my emails to go directly to me because I can see them faster. My office is actually in 331 Osmond Hall. If you need to see me outside of class time or when I'm not at the MTLC, the Math Technology Learning Center, you can make an appointment and we can meet one-on-one in my office. However, I will be in the MTLC, that's the math lab, every Tuesday when the lab is open from 8 till 9:30 in the morning and again from 6 to 7 in the evening, every Tuesday. So if you have some problems and you can come to the lab at that time, you can get help from me directly. You can also get help from other people at other times, but if you want to see me, that's a really good time to catch me. You'll know I'll be there. If you want to make an appointment otherwise, just see me after class or email me and we can set up a time to meet in my office. I'm going to emphasize this very important point, and that is 110 is a terminal course. It doesn't serve as a prerequisite for any other course. So if you don't think this is the last math class that you have to take for your major, this is probably not the course you should be in. For example, if you have to have Math 112 or something higher than that, you do not need to be in this class. It's not going to help you proceed further. So if your major requires something above Math 110, this is not the course you should be in. You can talk to me after class or at some other point if you'd like. But make sure you know, if you even think that you might change your major to something that requires a higher math, it might be a good idea to take another course instead of Math 110. I've already mentioned that my email back and forth with you will be at my regular email account, lbowen@ua.edu. Please check your email regularly because I send out messages periodically that might have an effect on things that you're interested in about the course, so please check it regularly. A lot of this course requires the use of a calculator. Some of the things we'll do in the course you need to get this calculator. I think it's only about $10. You can get it in the university supply store. I'm pretty sure it's about $10, at least it used to be. Um, and you have to have it. So if you haven't gotten it already, just go ahead and get it. This course is a Math Lab course, the Math Technology Learning Center, MTLC, often it's called the Math Lab. The course operates where you're doing your assignments through a software package and you have to have an access code. Now, if you go to the supply store and buy the book, it will be packaged with the access code. So if you go in and buy the book, the access code will be there. It is possible to get into the software, go online, and buy the access code without buying the textbook. But the fact of the matter is there's not a whole lot of difference in price. So you're basically paying for the access code, and the book is thrown in for just a small amount extra. So you don't have to have a book. It's not a requirement, but there's really not a whole lot of difference in price. And some people want to have that physical book. There is a copy electronically within the software where you can actually bring up and see the page just as if it were in a book. So you do have that option of just seeing it online rather than having a physical book. Either way you decide to do it, though, you have to have that access code. And once you get that, you're going to have a lot of material. They've got some, like I said, a copy of the online textbook. There are video lectures, lots of other things. And it's where you have to go in to do your homework and quizzes. Those assignments are required as part of the course. So you have to have that access code. However, if you're having problems at the beginning of the semester with getting everything paid, there is a 21-day temporary code available. It's a little bit better if you just go ahead and get the code now and you'll have to switch it out later. But if financial concerns are an issue for you, there is a temporary code. There's a link, or probably looks like a button within the software that says temporary code or something to that effect. And if you click that, you can get a temporary code that's good for 21 days. At the end of the 21 days, though, you will have to have had the actual permanent code. But you do have that grace period. This is what we call an ABC-NC course. Your grade will either be an A with plus or minus, a B including the possibility of plus or minus, or a C with the possibility of plus or minus, or NC. NC means no credit. That means you don't get credit for the course. You don't get a D, you don't get an F, and if you get an NC, it does not affect your GPA at all. You just have to take the course again. So keep in mind, you don't get a D or an F, but you can get an NC. Doesn't affect your GPA, but you do have to take the course again. As a point of interest, the last day of withdrawal from this course is Wednesday, March the 25th. The math department does not issue withdrawals after that date. You'll just have an NC, and honestly, there's not really much difference between a W and an NC anyway. Your grades will be determined exactly as follows. The individual instructors really don't have much at all to do with your grade. Everything is done centrally in the math lab so that everyone is treated exactly the same. Your participation points for coming to class and going to the lab is 2% of your grade. Your homework average is a 13% part of your grade. Your quiz average, 15%. There's something called a study plan, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is 10%. And you have 4 tests. They're 15% of your grade each for a grand total of 60% of your grade. That's exactly how your course grade is determined. There's no extra credit. There's no alternate way to get points. That's exactly the way your grade will be determined. You have to get at least 70% to pass. Otherwise, you get the NC. We'll be meeting every Monday and Wednesday at our normal class time, 33:50, and you'll get attendance credit for that. I will pass around a roll and you'll sign it, and that's how you'll get your attendance credit for class. Don't have your cell phones and laptops out surfing the web during class. Some people actually like to bring up the lecture notes during class, and I have no objection to that as long as it's not distracting to other people. If you're sitting there with your laptop and you're looking at YouTube videos or whatever, and the person behind you gets distracted by it, I'm going to ask you not to do that. But if you're bringing up your class lecture notes and you're actually following along and doing things productively, I don't think that would distract anyone, and that's okay. So if you're going to do that, just make sure you're doing class work there. If you're going to have to leave early, let me know. Otherwise, I won't give you credit for class if you just leave halfway through and I have not been notified in advance. This is a 3 credit hour course. We're going to meet 2 days a week, basically 2 hours. That third hour, you're required to spend in the math lab doing work. So that's how the 3 hours comes in. Basically 2 hours in class and then an hour a week where you can go to the math lab. Now, your schedule gives you a particular time to be in the lab. There's an extra day that says you're in the lab at a certain time. That's meaningless. You have to spend the time, an hour a week in the MTLC, but it does not have to be at the time listed on your schedule. The class at the Monday Wednesday class is at the definite time, 3 to 3:50, but the hour you spend in the MTLC is whenever it's open. You can do your hour anytime, and you can do it 30 minutes and 30 minutes, or however you want to do it, as long as it adds up to the amount of time by the end of the week. Every time you go in the math lab, you swipe your action card to swipe in, and then you swipe your action card to swipe out. If you don't have an action card, you're not going to get your credit, so you have to have a valid and working action card in order to get your lab attendance credit. But again, you can go anytime the math lab is open and get your time. Now, speaking of the hours of operation, Monday through Thursday, the lab opens at 8 in the morning and stays open until 10 at night. On Fridays, it still opens at 8 in the morning, but it closes at 4:45. They're only weekend hours. So those are the times you can go over. There will be instructors and graduate students and student assistants monitoring the room and walking around, and you can ask questions. Anytime you have a question as you're working, you can get help just almost instantaneously. If you need to call the math lab, the phone number, of course, is area code 205-348-2592. And the website, which you will be using, if nothing else, to register for test times, is www.mtlc.ua.edu. Now, this is a public place, so there are going to be rules so that students can actually come in and study. Always remember, this is a classroom. You don't need to be loud. You need to think about the person sitting near you, and just be courteous. As I said earlier, there will be people wandering the room waiting for you to ask questions. That's their job, and that's what they're there to do, so don't hesitate to ask. Don't bring in other work. This is strictly a math classroom. And you can't bring in foods, drinks, any kind of tobacco products. You can't use your cell phone while you're in the lab, play music, anything else. In fact, some people put headphones on and play their music, but they don't realize that it's so loud. Other people can hear it next to them, so don't do that either. If you're going to play music on headphones, it needs to be low so that no one around you can hear that. Just keep in mind that this is a classroom setting. As I said earlier, part of your assignments are called homework. Those are 20 graded assignments spread out through the semester, basically one per section for the most part. And the deadlines show up both in the syllabus, which you have a copy, physical copy, and an online copy. And the deadlines also show up in the assignment software. You can save them, close them, return to them, complete them later. So if you work 5 problems, decide you need to go, you can save those, come back later, finish them up. You can work them and rework them as many times as you want to. All you have to do is click on there's a button that says similar exercise. That'll give you a replacement exercise. So if you miss a problem in the homework and you want to get credit for it, just hit similar problem, work that problem correctly, and that will replace the miss. So you should be able to get 100% on every single homework. You can do them as much as you want to until the deadline comes. At the end of the semester, the lowest 3 homework grades would automatically be dropped. So you'll get a little bit of a break if you miss one or if you do poorly on 1 or 2. Those will go away. The lowest 3 will get replaced automatically at the end of the semester. The rest of your homework scores will be averaged and count 13% of your final grade. Then there are the quizzes. The quiz is more like a mini test. There will be 21 of them, basically again 1 per section. You can't, with the homework you get immediate feedback, you know if you got it right or wrong. The quiz is more like a normal test or a mini test where you do them all and then you get graded at the end. So don't hit the submit button until you've done everything. So you do problem number 1, then you go to 2 without knowing whether you got 1 right, and you go to 3 not knowing if you got 1 or 2 right, and so on. And at the end you hit submit, and only then you'll know. So it's a different environment. The homework, you can work the problems and know immediate feedback whether you got them right or wrong. The quiz, you do the whole thing and get a score at the end. So a little bit different. But you can do the quizzes as many times as you want to. So if you go through the quiz and make an 82 and you're not happy with that, you can retake the quiz. You can't do them a problem at a time and just fix the problems you missed like you can with the homework, but you can take the whole quiz over again. So again, theoretically, if you start early enough, you should be able to make 100 on every quiz because you can just keep doing it over and over again. And only the highest score you make is used. So if you score an 82 and then to get a 100, the 82 goes away. You can get help while you're doing homework. If the people are walking around, the student workers and the instructors walking around, you can ask them for any help you want on the homework. However, the quizzes are again like a mini test. You can't get help while you're taking a quiz. However, if you miss a problem on a quiz, you can call, at that point, you can call someone over and get some help on the problems you missed and then retake the quiz. You just can't get help in the midst of a quiz. But after the quiz is over, you can bring up the problems you missed, get help, and then take the quiz again. And as with the homework, your lowest 3 grades will automatically be dropped for the quizzes as well at the end of the semester. And the remaining quizzes will be averaged and count 15% of your grade. I mentioned earlier something called a study plan. The study plan is a good thing to review with before every test. The study plan is tailored specifically to you, and what happens is the software monitors the problems, the kind of problems you're having trouble with as you take the quizzes. So if you go through a quiz and miss 2 or 3 problems, the software remembers that and will add those problems to your study plan because it figures that you need some help with that. If you have a bunch of quizzes where you're not missing anything, your study plan is going to be populated less. If you're missing a lot, your study plan will be populated more. So it's individualized to what you do. Now, the study plan continues from the beginning of the course to the end, but when you get in your test time, I think that would be a good time to go into your study plan and work through it up until the last section is going to be covered on the test. So for example, with test 1, when it gets near test 1, go into your study plan and work all those problems associated with test 1 material. And then when you get near test 2, you go into the study plan and work those problems that are associated with test 2 material and so on. You don't have to do it that way. It's not due until the very end of the semester. You could be very irresponsible and wait and do the whole thing at the end of the semester. However, I think you'll regret that later. Or you can work some study plan problems every day. That would be fine too. But my recommendation is to work them just prior to each test, working only those problems that will be on that test. I think that's a really good way to approach the study plan. And as you get into that and have questions about it, basically with the study plan, you can practice without getting any credit for having done anything. You have to actually do it's called Quiz Me, and doing the Quiz Me generates those mastery points, which signify to the study plan that you've done what's being required. So as you get into that, you can ask some questions and you can play around with it. But you should see those mastery points, and if you do the Quiz Me, those mastery points will show that you actually mastered something, and you can see that you got those points. But we'll talk about that more as the semester goes along. As I said, it's unique to you. Everybody's study plan will be slightly different based on how they did on the quizzes and what they were missing. It's not due to the end of the semester, but as I said, you'd be very foolish, in my opinion, to wait. In the end, that's worth 10% of your grade. That's a letter grade. It's very, very important. Now, testing. You will take tests not during class, but you will take them in the math lab. It'll always be on a Tuesday. So we have something called Test Week, where Math 110 will be testing on Tuesdays. Math 112 will maybe have a different day. Math 121 and so on. Anyway, the math lab is constantly testing during Test Week. The test day for Math 110 is Tuesday. You'll be able to go online to the MTLC website that I showed you earlier and register for a time to take that test. And actually, there are 4 tests, regular tests, and you'll register for them at the same time. So when you go on, you'll register for a time for test 1, then you'll go into test 2, register for that exact same time, then you'll go into test 3, register for that exact same time, and then you'll go into test 4 registration and register for that exactly the same time. So even though there are 4 separate tests, at the beginning of the semester, you will register for all 4. The first test will be February the 3rd, second test will be February the 24th, the third test will be March the 24th, and the fourth test will be April the 14th. But at the beginning of the semester, very soon, there'll be a registration period opening up. You'll go onto the website and you'll register for a time on Tuesday. You'll check your schedule, make sure you're free then. You'll pick a time on Tuesday that you're always free, and you'll sign up for all 4 tests at the same time of the day that you chose for test 1. They'll all be the same. There is an optional final at the end of the semester. If you're happy with your grade after you've taken all 4 tests and have your quiz average and homework and attendance all calculated in there, if you're happy with your grade, you're done. But if you made a bad grade on test 2, say, or there's something about your grade you're not happy with, you can take the final. It's optional, but you can take it, and that final will replace your lowest test grade. So if you have a 60 on test 2 and it's pulling your average down, then you take the final, maybe get an 85 on it and get rid of that 60. So the final is optional, but it can help you if you're not where you need to be at the end of the semester. And you'll register for that separately. You'll register for the regular test all at once near the beginning of the semester, but you won't register for a final time until closer to the end of the semester. And that final is different than the regular test in that you can choose different days. The final, you can take it as early as April the 27th, as late as May the 1st, and you go on and you can pick, doesn't have to be a Tuesday, you can pick whatever day works best for your schedule. Now also, I did say during test week your tests on Tuesdays and all that. However, it is possible to take the tests early. So if you want to work ahead, you might be done with the course by spring break. It's possible. If you get ahead, just talk to me individually and I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. But you can work ahead. You just can't get behind. So if you want to take the first test on January the, I don't know what the day of the week would be, but January the 28th, assuming it was when the lab was open, you could do that. As long as it's not the week of the tests, the official week of the tests. Okay, what about makeups? If you miss homework or a quiz because the deadline passed and you hadn't done it, if you're part of the way through, it'll just take the score you had. If you didn't do it at all, you'll get a 0. However, your lowest 3 homeworks and quizzes will be dropped, so that's sort of an out. You don't get a makeup, but you do get some drops. If you miss a test, you'll get a 0, and it can be replaced by the final. So again, you don't get a makeup, but you get essentially a replacement possibility. The final just replaces the test that you missed. If you have any type of assignment you have to miss because of official university business, you have to make arrangements for that beforehand, not coming in afterwards and say, oh, by the way, this was an official university event. You have to do it beforehand. Talked a little bit about replacement. Let's be specific. The Math 110 final is not required. It's an optional. You never have to take the final. However, if you do take it, it replaces your lowest test score. Again, I said that already, but just for emphasis, that's the way this course works. Unless you get a 0 for some type of academic misconduct. If you're given a 0 on the test because you brought in a calculator you weren't supposed to, or you brought in a cheat sheet, which please don't do that. That kind of 0 will never be replaced. It will stay. You can also work from home. The software works just as well from home as it does in the lab, theoretically. You just have to go into the software called My Math Lab. Browser check. It's called My Math Lab Browser Check. It checks on, make sure you have what you need, and helps you install the things you need to make the program run, all the plugins. You don't have to do that once. But if you do that, you can work from home. It's our experience that the software works best with Firefox. You may have trouble with some of the other browsers, so I would suggest if you don't have Firefox, go ahead and download it and use that. It's probably going to be your safest bet. At some point, the software will tell you that you've timed out, or some similar message to that. If that happens, usually you can fix it very easily by just clearing your browser history along with your cookies. You may have to close the browser out and reopen it, but if you clear your cache and cookies and close the browser out and reopen it, that will generally solve that problem. If not, well, try switching to a different browser, especially if you're not using Firefox, or maybe just restart your whole computer. But most of the time, especially if you get that timeout message, if you just clear your cache of history and cookies, close the browser, and then open it back up, that'll solve the problem. As I said, you can work from home. You can do the homework and quizzes at home if you like, but my suggestion is work well ahead of deadlines. If you're pressing the deadlines and you start 30 minutes before the deadline, you're just asking for trouble. That way, if you do have problems from home, your internet connection goes down, your computer dies, something happens, you have time to come to the MTLC and get your assignments done there. So if you press the deadlines and have problems, that's your responsibility, and you're not going to get any resolution from the math lab. You have to start early if you're working, especially if you're working from home. But in any case, it's a good idea to start early. But especially if you work from home, start early so that if something goes wrong, you can get to the math lab and get those assignments done. They're not going to extend your deadlines because you call up and say, well, I started 30 minutes before the deadline and I lost my internet connection. My wireless went out, whatever. So you have to start early so that you don't get caught in these sorts of things. However, you can't do your tests anywhere but in the MTLC, and we'll talk more about that later. If you have any disability accommodations, they have to be set up through the UA Office of Disability Services. That phone number is 205-348-4285. You'll have to bring that paperwork in when you get it. Bring it to me, one copy to me, and take a copy over to the MTLC. That way, I know what's going on, and the MTLC has to have that for their records, or you're not going to get the accommodations that you are supposed to get. You have to do that, all of that, bringing it to me and to the MTLC. And do it as soon as possible. They need some turnaround time to get things set up the way they need to be set up. So as soon as you get that paperwork, bring me a copy and take a copy over to the MTLC. And you have to redo that every semester. So if you've done it in a previous semester, you still have to do it again. The Center for Academic Success has lots of extra help. You can go to the website cas.ua.edu and see all the things available. If you go directly to the link I put here, it'll take you, you won't have to sort of make so many clicks. This will take you essentially right to where you need to go. But there are lots of walk-in help sessions. There's even an option to do some distance tutoring through Blackboard Collaborate, where the tutor's on the other end with the headphone and software so that that tutor can see your computer screen and you can share problems and talk, and it's a very nice system. So all those options are available, but you do have to take initiative and find out about those things. You can always call over there, 348-8854, if you have any questions about what's going on, if you have any problems or anything. But the first step, I think, is to go to the CAS website and just explore and see what's available. And then go over and get some help or use the distance options. You can't get help without taking the initiative yourself. Okay, what about the software? I keep referring to doing homework and quizzes in the software. You've actually already been put into the software, so you don't have to go through the step of putting yourself in. So what you're really interested in is how to log in. That information is in your syllabus, but basically all you do is go to http://ua.mylabsplus.com and use your Crimson email prefix, in other words, the part before the @ symbol in your Crimson email address, as the username, and use your CWID as a password. You can also go in through Blackboard and find it that way, and there's something called a MyMathLab Bridge, and you can go in there and bypass this. This is the most direct way to go in, and if Blackboard goes down, you can still get in this way. It just saves you a step if you go in directly. However, you can go in through Blackboard. And if you do that, you just look for the course, and actually I can see now that the course number is wrong. This is actually section 8. Let's see if I can fix that really quickly. It's actually section 8008. And you can go in without going to that website in option 1. It's an extra step, but if Blackboard's down, you certainly need to be able to go directly there using option 1. However, you've got to have that access code to get to this content that you want to work. And as I said, there's a temporary code, so you're never out. You should never be sitting there waiting on the time when you can buy the access code. You've got 21 days with a temporary if you need it. But whether it's temporary or permanent, you have to put in that access code to start doing this work. Now, what are you going to do before class next time, assuming you haven't already been working on this, which you could have. That'd be nice if you had. You need to get that access code if you haven't, whether it's temporary or permanent. You need to go on and log into the software. If you have any trouble, go over to the MTLC. They're set up to help you. They know that people are going to come in with problems on how to do this in the beginning, and that's what they're there for. That's their job. So go over and get help if you're having trouble. And there's something called a syllabus quiz, which is actually just a quiz to see if you know how the course works, and you can actually take the syllabus out and look at it as you do the syllabus quiz. It's mainly just to get you to think about what the course is all about and how it works, and what better way than to quiz you on it. So you can use your syllabus during the quiz, and you can take it over and over again until you get 100 on it, up until the deadline. So go ahead and get that knocked out of the way. I would suggest getting a notebook for class notes and writing down things, and a place where you can do your scratch work or your working through the problems. I would highly suggest a notebook. Be a good study guide when you go back later and start studying. How did you do that problem? And when you're studying for the final, you can go back and see how you did things earlier. I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it one more time. 110 is a terminal course. It's not a prerequisite for anything. If you're going to take a math course higher than 110, 110 is not a prerequisite for it. It's not going to help you get there. This course has a very good pass rate, and the main thing is you have to start early and keep up and make a commitment to do things by the deadlines or ahead of the deadlines. And if you'll do that, come to class, work without getting behind, try to stay ahead of the deadlines, you're almost certainly going to do good on this course. And then anytime you're struggling, don't just sit there. Ask for help. Go to the MTLC, contact the Center for Academic Success. You've got tons of help, but you have to take the initiative and ask for it. So get off to a good start this semester. Work hard. Don't get behind. And let me know anytime things are not going well, and we'll figure out how we can get you back on track.